One of the most illustrious pianists that history has known doubtlessly is Franz Liszt. If you would ask even today to the average piano lover who in his or her mind is the greatest pianist of all time, the chances are really big that the name of Franz Liszt comes up at the top, at first place. That's very understandable, but at the same time a little bit strange because no one living today heard Franz Liszt playing. So the reason that we think that he is the greatest pianist of all times, which probably he was and he is based on several factors, partly because of the admiration that he gained during his lifetime as a pianist. He was really admired for his piano playing during the whole span of his long life. Secondly, also he knew the art of creating a kind of mystification around this figure in a very positive sense. But thirdly, that we today, without ever having heard Franz Liszt playing, that we put him on top of our list of greatest pianists of all times, that we are convinced that when we would listen to Franz Liszt that he would not disappoint us, is also because we are humans and we like and we do project our current feeling, our current passion to historical figures. We need those icons to come along with us during our lives, and that's very normal and that's in fact a good thing as well. The question or the topic of this video of today is that imagine if Franz Liszt would play a concert tomorrow in Carnegie Hall. Would the result of his performance match completely with our imagination, or would he surprise us with the way he played? Would his playing match the playing of great pianists of today? Or would it be very different? So let's see if we can shape a little bit of context around Liszt and the way he might have played. And we will in a few minutes go to a very interesting source which is given us by Charles-Marie Widor, the famous French organist. But in order to really understand what Widor is saying, I have to take you back first to 1840. In that time, a lot of things changed. That's very easy to reconstruct because a lot of people have written about that. Certainly the older generation, and we have made some videos on that already. I will link them here on the info card. For instance, the famous Tomacek metronome numbers on the Mozart Don Giovanni opera. So briefly, around 1840 a lot of things changed in a very short period of time. Piano players, young generation of piano players, but music performance in general changed rapidly. People were practicing very difficult exercises and even projecting that gained technical skill to the classical works that for the first time actually in history were played in concerts on a large scale. So we are now in a period where a young generation of pianists is practicing hours and hours a day with the most difficult things and of course increasing their technical skills. And we do read a lot of quotes from even Beethoven but others as well that they were opposed to that because that gained technique was projected in their works as well. So we have there an older generation of musicians like Moscheles. We talked about Fink. Leipzig was a bastion, I think, from conservative culture, also in playing. But we have also Schindler. That's a name that musicologists today don't like too much. We will make some videos on Schindler because we have to be much more nuanced in the way he tried to keep this Beethoven legacy living. So you have a lot of people actually commenting on that, stating that at least that there is a change, that a shift in tempi. That's, by the way, a period that you will musicologists hear very little talking about because it's hard to explain how then that old generation like Moscheles, like Czerny, started to give metronome numbers to the works they knew from Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven, how they thought it should be played. It just exactly lines up with the Tomacek Don Giovanni video. So Moscheles, Czerny, Hummel, they all gave metronome numbers to those old works, and surprisingly, if we take those metronome numbers, they are so incredibly fast, even faster than we today play in most cases, and in really a lot of cases even unplayable. And so it's very hard to explain how in 1840 the same generation that gave us this warp speed metronome numbers commented on the new generation of pianists who played the classical works way too fast. Because if we can not even reach those numbers in great number, I mean 80%, 70% of the fast metronome numbers they gave, and there are literally thousands of them, all lined up with each other. There are now big differences between Mozart, Czerny and other metronome numbers, Mendelssohn, Chopin, you name it. How on earth it is possible that around 1840, that same generation, those same people commented on that new generation playing even way faster. So the double beat metronome theory comes, of course, in place. And that's the reason why I think that you hear very little on that. The general rule of musicology today is that in the 19th century tempi went down and we have to reconstruct them again going up. But that would be for another video, but very shortly, a very strange idea that in this industrial age where everything speeded up, only musical tempi and performance practice and skills of pianists and violin players went down. The question we have now, having set this context a little bit, is how Liszt, living in that exact same period, he was at the height of his career, around 1840, what his position was. Of course, I'm just touching upon some details because otherwise this video would be 20 hours long. Let me just give you a few quotes, starting with Schindler in 1839. And those quotes come from this book, which is his Beethoven biography. But this is the English translation with a lot of footnotes by Ignaz Moscheles, which is really interesting because Moscheles comments on Schindler's standpoints when he does not agree with him, or he just enlightens, or he broadens the context around what he believed should have been mentioned in Beethoven's biography. That on the tempi issues, he is only confirming what Schindler is saying. Schindler is writing on dozens of places that at the end of Beethoven's life, certainly around 1839 when this was published, that the younger generation was just taking tempi that were going out of the roof. And I just give you one example, and there the name of Liszt is mentioned in relationship to Beethoven this time. So Schindler said, for during his, so Beethoven's lifetime, it used to be said that in Parisian orchestras the over-rapid performance of his quick movements made them resemble quadrilles and galoppades. Galoppades, I don't know in English how to pronounce that. Let us hope that among the musicians of France there will speedily arise some few who, unfettered by the bonds of fashion and devoid of egotism, will turn with a pure and deeply poetic spirit to the pianoforte works of Beethoven and draw freely from the ever-living waters of that sacred well which the muses have consecrated. Much, and now it comes, much has already been done in France by Franz Liszt, who so thoroughly comprehends the spirit of Beethoven. This is really interesting. So Schindler was commenting on a lot of performance in his practices in his book, but Franz Liszt, the pianist of who we today think that must have played very fast, he says Franz Liszt is one of the few that really understands Beethoven. Moscheles is another important source, and he had a long life. He met Beethoven, he met Chopin, Liszt, all the great musicians that we would like to meet. He met them all. Of course, not Mozart and Bach, but he wrote the same period in the same way as Schindler writes on the new generation and the increased tempi. And so in London, for his concert there in 1840, Moscheles was in the audience and he writes on Liszt's playing. I must also mention that I found Liszt's performance of Beethoven's E-flat major concerto to be highly satisfying for the most part. I cannot imagine the energetic spiritual part of the work being played better, but there were other passages which I would have prepared to hear in a more relaxed manner. Now, before you jump all on me and say, hey, there we have it, Liszt played way too fast, Moscheles is expressing his gratitude and his admiration for the way he played Beethoven. If you read his diary and put this quote in the context, what he says, that he would have preferred to have Liszt play some parts in a more relaxed manner, does not line up with the context of his diaries in which he just blames the new generation of destroying the music of Beethoven. So there we have two quotes that, and there are a lot more to be found in Moschles as well and in other sources as well in Czerny, but we just touch upon the details here. That sets Liszt a little bit apart from the general understanding of that time, where you have a new generation that was speeding up. Now I come to the key element of this video, and I'm sorry for the long introduction, but the context is not easy to sketch, and you need to have this background to understand completely what we are going to talk about now. I'm presenting you this book, which is a wonderful biography by Ben van Oosten on Charles-Marie Widor. It's in German. I will have the information in the description box here. But anyway, Widor, we know him as the great organist, the organist of the Saint-Sulpice in Paris. He was born in 1844 and he had a very long life. He died in 1937. So 1844 is exactly the period of this explosion of technique and mechanical playing, as I believe it was. But of course, he was a baby at the time. His father was an organ builder or related to organ builders, and they knew Cavaillé-Coll. Cavaillé-Coll was one of the greatest organ builders that history has known. He completely changed the musical landscape of that time in Paris just by introducing a new kind of symphonic organ. He was a brilliant person, also building networks constantly. As he did with Widor, he suggested to the father of Widor to send Charles-Marie to Brussels, here in Belgium, where Jacques-Nicolas, famous organist at the time, still today, great name, big name, was actually kind of representative of the so-called Bach style, because he had lessons from Rinck. Rinck had lessons from Kittel, and then we are with Bach. Now we have to always be very careful to say that if we can line up this tradition of teachers, that the last one in the row inherited exactly the style of Bach, which is, of course, I think, not true. But the thing is that Widor had a kind of unique experience, a kind of different education in Brussels than he would have had when he went just to the conservatory in Paris. And so now we come back to Liszt. Widor met Liszt for the first time in 1866, but the date we are heading for now is 1878. That was the first time that still young Widor had the chance to, in a kind of intimate environment, meet Franz Liszt. And so what happened was that Cavaillé-Coll, still networking, got a request from Liszt to visit his new organ that he built for the Trocadero, which was a big concert hall in Paris. And he invited Widor to present the organ for Liszt. So Widor was thrilled, of course, for the occasion. He went along. So with the three of them, they spent before noon in the Trocadero. Liszt played a little bit. He asked Widor to play some of his latest works, and he would have a listen in the hall. During lunch, Liszt said to Widor, "You've been so kind to me, how can I return the favor?" And Widor didn't have to think about that. He said, "If I just could hear you 5 minutes playing the piano." Now remember, Liszt kind of completely abandoned the public stage exactly in the same period as we were talking about, where this new style came to practice. And that's what I believe, that the older generation, Liszt, also Chopin, Moschles, they quit stage because it wasn't their style and the audience wanted that. But anyway, so Liszt replied, 5 minutes, that's not too long. Listen, I'm staying in Paris for the rest of the week. I'm staying at the chateau, at the castle of the Erard, so the builders of this piano. This is an English one, but it's the same family. And I'm practicing every day between 9 and 12. So you're welcome. And so Widor stayed there for 6 days. That must have been a wonderful, unique experience, because at the end of his life, even in interviews, he said, that was the most exciting moments of my musical life were there. And Liszt would have played Chopin, Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, and his own works, and Schumann and Schubert. And so now we see if we can find some anecdotes, some lines of Widor talking on the way Liszt played in the context of his time, which is the beginning of the 20th century. And so I read you some passages and think about the passages we just read from Moschles and from Schindler. And if they line up with each other, so if the Liszt that we hear in 1787 through the memory and the description of Widor lines up with those passages, then we might have a first step in this three-dimensional context around Liszt that might be a solid fact. So, listen what he had to say. In an interview in 1934, Widor said, "The ultimate goal of the young people is to play fast. When I believed I succeeded in accomplishing that goal, as a young player, my teacher, Lemmes, replied, 'It means nothing. It's without volonté, without accentuation.' I did not have the courage at the time to ask what he meant with volonté, but I soon understood it is related strongly to rhythm, as the authority of the speaker occurs by making his point, by his calm, by his punctuation, the right accents of his plea. Great players, as Liszt or Rubinstein, who never played fast, have emotionally touched an entire world. We better leave speed to the taxi drivers." During lessons with his pupil Vierne, I'm not talking on Liszt, but on the same element, on joue presque toujours trop vite. So in English, most play almost always too fast. It's false virtuosity that belongs in a circus, not on stage. Or during his lessons with Marcel Dupré, how many times he repeated to me, Dupré says, Liszt never gave the impression of playing fast. Of course, speed is something that's hard to catch, it's hard to grab, it's very subjective, but in the context of this video, having had these quotes from Moscheles and Schindler, having also the metronome numbers by Schindler also, so fast, in double beat understanding, of course, it becomes another story. Lining up with Widor is something that's remarkable, I think, and sets Liszt apart from what we today would see as virtuosic playing, like for instance a brilliant pianist, by the way, as Lang Lang is doing. I believe we would be very surprised, really very surprised, to hear Liszt play. It must have been very expressive, touching, but not in a virtuosic way as today. We certainly will dive more into Liszt in detail when the pianoforte is here. Again, if you would like to listen to some Chopin pieces played here at my piano, it's in a recording 18 years ago. I've made that on this piano. I will link it here in the cards, and that's all I've got for you today in this video. Thank you for staying with me so long. If this is your first time on Authentic Sound, I'd love to have you subscribed. I'm not always taking so much time to talk. I do play a lot. I've made 150 music recordings now on my clavichord, all on YouTube. Wednesday is the time for these kind of videos, and on Friday we have Inspiration Day, where I share with you performances or documentaries that I found on the internet or just from my vinyl collection. If that concept appeals to you, hit that subscribe button, and then we see each other very soon again. Bye.